as we're using these tools, we're also training them in real time. The current kind of political climate that we're in, it's this double-edged sword, right? Do you choose to say, okay, I'm going to really research and only choose tools that align with my morals and ethics? Or am I going to be the Trojan horse and try and change the system from within? And that's really tricky for women, and it's a hard landscape to navigate. We need to know that as consumers, we are actually actively shaping these things. We actually have conscious consumers that care about the environment, sustainability, cultural impact, that want to make sure this doesn't make the world a horrible place for our children and our children's children. The things that you talk about and care about and the way that you phrase sentences and ideas actually shapes how AI models then will respond back to us. Globally, we have a landscape that really puts women at risk right now. And this is something that I feel like every day I watch the news and I am internally screaming about why is this not the first headline every single day. AI is changing the world and we aren't talking about the people that are getting left behind. And that gap is massive and accelerating because of how fast AI is accelerating. While there's never been a moment in history like this, there's also never been a moment in history where women actually can make a different decision. We have always been suppressed and catching up, and we have always been noticing that gap and then making noise about not being happy about the gap. We have a really tiny moment in history where we may be able to avoid the gap altogether by answering this call to arms, by leveraging the fact that we are aware and educated and we feel empowered and we actually can choose to do something about it. And you don't have to be in government or in machine learning. You can be a user. And just by interacting and engaging with these tools, upskilling yourself so you protect your job and you are still competitive in the job market, but also talking about the things that you care about with large language models, you can inform how those tools perceive humanity and the sorts of ideas they put forward and the types of language that they use. And that is a huge amount of power on an individual level.
Welcome to Authentic AI for Entrepreneurs, the podcast that shows you how to leverage the power of AI technology without wasting your time or selling your soul. Let's embrace making AI work for you. Hey, my human friend, and welcome to the Authentic AI podcast. I am so excited to be back in your earbuds today, and we are dishing up something extra special. Earlier this week, I hosted a live roundtable with AI women experts talking about the political climate right now. So we covered a lot of those bigger issues that you might just be wondering about, whether it's AI environmental impact or data bias and gender equity, or even how to use these tools in a way that you feel just aligns with your own ethics and values. Oh man, this conversation was so dang good, and I cannot wait to share the replay with you today in this episode. But I do just want to share before you dive in, I do have an awesome resource guide that goes along with this talk. You will find it at diywith.ai/roundtable-resources. You can find that link in the description of this episode. And also, this was originally a YouTube live stream. So this has a video included. You don't necessarily need to watch this. If you'd prefer to listen, go right ahead. But if you do want to watch this live stream replay, you'll find the link to the YouTube video in the description as well. If you have any questions about this topic, please reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Authentic AI for Entrepreneurs. Also, make sure that you connect with our awesome panelists. I have linked everyone's Instagram in the description as well. If you're interested in these topics, I want to thank you, and I would love to connect with you and continue this conversation because I think it's really important right now. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. With these amazing women AI experts. We are here to talk about a lot of really hot topics and also somewhat spicy topics right now. So I can't wait to get into it. But I just wanted to start off this conversation by saying thank you so much for joining and being interested in these topics of ethical AI, environmental impact, gender gap, data bias, all the things, because that's what we're going to cover today. And I really thank you for taking the time to learn about this stuff I think the best thing we can do right now is to just have these conversations and spread the awareness of what this all means, what it means for us in our business, and also on that broader scale worldwide. And also those small and big actions that we can take to make a difference, make an impact in the future of AI and how it is coming together. Because I think we have a responsibility as business owners, women, leaders. So I just wanted to say that you guys, we are in this together. And while we're talking about a lot of stuff today, and there's a lot of chaos in the world right now, don't worry. We are all in this together. And I'm really proud of you for just coming to this conversation and just starting this learning journey with us. So thank you so much. Before we introduce this panel of women experts, I do just want to also say that as the founder of Authentic AI and with my podcast, I would love to welcome any diverse perspectives this year. If you have any thoughts on any of these topics, and if you feel like sharing anything when it comes to AI topics, please reach out to me. I'm Kinsey at Authentic AI, and I'd love to share your voice on my Authentic AI podcast too, moving forward. So I did just want to start by having us all do a little introduction. I'll go ahead and kick it off. Hello, friends. I'm Kinsey. My business is Authentic AI, and we believe in making AI work for you in a way that aligns with you without sacrificing your authenticity or thought leadership. I really believe in a human-first approach to AI tools. So using AI to help us expand our creativity, to enhance our critical thinking skills instead of depleting them, which we'll talk about today. And in this conversation, I really just want to bring that awareness when it comes to these bigger topics in the AI stuff, because we're all using these tools. We're all loving these tools. So let's learn about the impact that they're having and the difference that we can make. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves as well. Nikki, would you like to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kinsey, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I know that we're all really excited to share this space and to hear each other's thoughts. I'm Dr. Nikki Sweeney. I'm based in Australia. I'm a data scientist and academic that has always had a passion for patterns and algorithms and code, and also gender equity. So with generative AI, I really started to become concerned and passionate about women's place in the generative AI era, and making sure that we're included and making sure that our voices are heard and making sure that we're able to leverage AI for good in the world and to launch and scale our dream, because women have amazing dreams and we often don't get to the point where the world sees them because of society and all the things. And we can talk about that in a little bit. So I founded AI Her Way in the middle of 2023, and we are now an AI consultancy that help organizations and education institutions integrate ethical AI. So we do a lot of AI literacy training, a lot of AI strategy, compliance, regulation, data safety, and I travel around the world speaking about women in AI and the importance of that. So we've worked with 65 businesses at this point. I think I've done around 80 talks. I'm just back from Switzerland speaking at the United Nations head offices on the importance of women being involved in the AI era. And I really care about this not ending the world, which is why I get excited about talking about it. So that's me, and I will pass to, I think, Lauren.
Thank you, Nikki. And also thank you, Kinsey, for putting this all together. This is amazing. I am Lauren Devane. I am known around the internet as your AI auntie. And I started out I got my degree in graphic design, and then I was working for Walgreens corporate as a designer. And then I was working at Ulta Beauty. When I left Ulta Beauty, I was the creative director over social media. And so I come from a very social marketing design background. And when I left Ulta, I started a design business to help small women-owned businesses with their branding and their marketing and their social. And but I was doing that for 2 years. And then I started playing with AI, and immediately I saw all the possibilities that AI could have for creative entrepreneurs. So I immediately shifted into that space, because I saw the writing on the wall and knew that AI was going to be taking off. And I just saw how much potential there really was for small business owners, specifically creatives, who I think so many creatives feel like AI is maybe going to take their job rather than be a tool to help them in their job. So I am a huge proponent of AI as a creative collaborator and as a creative co-pilot, rather than something that is going to be your downfall. So that is really what I believe in. And now I have a course where I teach creative entrepreneurs how to use ChatGPT. And I have a program where I'm teaching creative entrepreneurs how to build a full brand using AI. So I really feel very strongly about keeping up with the tools and figuring out which the right tools are for you. And so I'm hoping to bring a lot of the perspective around what's happening with the new administration in terms of what that means for tools that we're using, as well as what's happening with the paywall and what that means for democratizing so many of these tools. Hopefully I can bring a lot to chat about.
Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be part of this conversation. I feel like every time people talk about AI, it's always like apps and tools. And so to actually have a more in-depth conversation, I'm so excited. So I actually graduated in 2007 as a high school history teacher. And I used to think 2007 and the recession was bad for things coming into the job market. But I feel like people coming in right now, it's got to be just like a whole other ballgame. But basically after I got hired, fired, like typical recession story. And in 2014, when I was finally settled, I was like, why did I graduate so unprepared for the world of work? And why do some people know about everything that's happening and other people don't? Like, what's going on? So I actually started researching AI back in 2014. I had read a book called The Second Machine Age. And the last line of the book was, technology is not destiny. We shape our destiny. And I was like, oh, I want to learn how to shape our destiny. And basically that got me down AI. So basically for the past decade, I've been researching what are the skills and mindsets we'll need to prepare young people in our schools for an AI world. And I actually had a documentary that came out in 2022, September 2022. And I was like, okay, back burner, this isn't going to happen for another 4 to 5 years. And I just checked out. And before November, ChatGPT arrived, and the rest is history. And so we work with schools, businesses, nonprofits on AI integration, but really with a specific lens on the human advantage, like shaping your destiny. What is your role, human agency, in a world with AI to amplify what it is we do best. So excited to be here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey. I'm actually the back end of what's been shared so far. So I'm a data analyst, and I'm known on the internet as the data whisperer because I come in and I find those little nuggets of information that are hiding in business owners' data, their dusty Google spreadsheets, the confusing platforms. And I go in there and root around like my little ADHD brain was born to do and find how they can make more human connection based on what the data is showing. What's the customer behavior? What are the actual patterns that we're seeing in the data? And then I layer on top of that how AI can help them make those connections more effectively. But my actual background is I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialized in adolescencehood experience, sexual trauma, and that got burnt out real fast. And so I transitioned into a more administrative role in my organization and took a highly technical role there. And so I come from healthcare. I come from training the data and analyzing bias in the data based on specialized populations, algorithmic bias, as well as population bias. And those are all things we'll get to talk to here at some point. But I come from a place of accessibility in AI and addressing the biases that we see and how we can make AI support, much like has been shared already, support the human interactions we're already making, but ensuring that we're doing that not based on a place of bias, not based on inappropriately trained data, but based on what can actually further those connections. Michelle, I'm throwing it to you.
Yay. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for hosting this. This is really already an incredible panel with some incredible speakers. A little bit about myself. My name is Michelle. I am the creative director and founder of MKW Creative Co. We are a brand design agency and social media marketing agency that pretty much dabbles in all things aesthetic, packaging, social, branding, the whole bit. And our kind of tagline is we build brag-worthy brands. So we want to create the kind of brands that people can't shut up about. I got introduced to AI through Lauren on my podcast, the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast, and Lauren's been a repeat guest. She has been an absolute wealth of knowledge and has transformed our business, I think, for the better with how to integrate these tools to help greenlight a lot of female entrepreneurs' business ideas faster. So I'm very passionate about the positive spin on AI and the benefits that it can bring to business ownership, but increasingly have become more concerned about the nefarious use of AI, especially when it comes to politics, social media marketing, disinformation, misinformation. I'm a fourth generation female entrepreneur in my family. So I'm surrounded by a lot of really strong, smart business women. And I think that this conversation needs to happen in and amongst groups of women. I think this is a beautiful venue to do so. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Maya. I, again, like everybody else, cannot express my gratitude enough to be here amongst all of these panelists. And thank you so much for putting this together. My business is The Course Corrector. I help online course creators optimize their online programs. They already have these programs and they're struggling to know what to exactly do with them in order to make them really take the next step. And where AI comes into that is I help them utilize AI efficiently as a tool, not as their own voice, to come into their courses and actually create strategic engagement pathways that allow their course takers to really get elevated to the next level in their transformation. The reason that I really wanted to come here today and speak with all of you, though, is that prior to The Course Corrector, I was an environmental educator. So I went all around South Carolina educating low-income communities on what it really meant to take stewardship into their own hands when it came to the environment and what impact really looked like. And a huge conversation is AI, because AI is now entering the school systems and they're utilizing it so often. So what is the environmental impact with AI and what can we actually do about it rather than sit back, watch, and just take all the information in?
Oh, I love this panel so much, you guys. I've been totally fangirling as I've been looking at you guys and like reading all your bios and stuff. So thank you again for joining us. And thank you to everyone who is watching this live. I just want to say before we dive into questions that this replay will be shared. Do not worry. And also I have a resource document. Let me find the link for that real quick. So the resource document, if you want to grab, that is where I have linked all the information from the speakers. It's also where I'm going to link any of the resources or studies or articles that we mentioned. I also have an ongoing list of women talking about AI topics and also advocates and information accounts that I've been loving to follow. So it's basically where we're just putting all of our brain dumps into that resource document. So grab that. And then because we're streaming in so many different places, I thought it would be easiest to just create a question Google document. So as we are speaking, if you have any specific questions that you want to ask the speakers, instead of dropping those in the chat, the best place you can do is drop them in the questions document. And this is where you can find the questions document. And I will be moderating that, making sure that we answer all your awesome questions. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and kick this off because, man, so many topics, so many important topics, spicy topics, and they all kind of swirl together, which is why I wanted to bring all you guys on here. I am going to actually just throw the mic to Nikki to start out with, because Dr. Nikki Sweeney is actually the woman who first opened my eyes to women using AI, why more women really need to embrace using AI and the impact it can have when it comes to the gender income gap, but also the way that these models are being trained and all that jazz. And also, Nikki, I know that you recently spoke at the UN, which was so awesome. So can you please just share with us some of the thoughts and what you've been seeing in the world lately when it comes to AI tools?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. That's a lovely introduction. I must say I'm very proud if I introduced you to it, because I often see you talking about women in AI and I'm like, yes, more voices that talk about this kind of stuff. The landscape around artificial intelligence. So for everybody that is listening in and might listen to this later, it's a really key thing to remember that when we talk about AI, we're not just talking about ChatGPT. So in the generative AI era, the word AI has become synonymous with ChatGPT, but when we actually talk about AI, we're talking about thousands of different programs and tools and different ways of utilizing artificial intelligence. And all of that is really transforming the way that we work, how we spend our time, how we interact with each other, how we gather information and what we do with that information. And that has huge implications. It's not a tech thing anymore. It's not this extra bit over here that maybe we'll engage with and maybe we won't. Whether or not you use AI or know that you're using it, it's making decisions about you all of the time. So this is a really big deal on a societal and cultural level. And it's not just maybe that could write my email quicker. Okay, we've moved far beyond that. So there's a few reasons why I'm really passionate about women in AI, and everybody in this room shares these sorts of concerns. There's really 5 big pillars that define why this is an issue that we should all be thinking about and all should be engaged in. So the first one is there's only really one group of people that are making all the AI tools that we use, and it's predominantly men, and it's predominantly men in America. There's models that have come out of China. There are models that are in other places, but for most of people joining these calls, when you're in the global north and you're in these westernized countries, most of the tools you have access to are owned and made in America by a bunch of dudes, okay? And that's not inherently bad. It's just like there's not a whole lot of diversity happening when you get to who is in control of these things. The next one is that the data is inherently biased. So many people I talk to and businesses I walk into go, isn't AI great because it's not biased? And oh crap, really? Okay, so the data is not unbiased. We have humans that have made decisions about what data is included in training the AI algorithms, and we have humans that have made decisions about how the code operates. So beyond just inherently humans being a little bit flawed, data is about looking for patterns, right? So in my life as a data scientist, people would hire me to come and look at all these numbers and information and make a story out of it. And AI is trained to do the same. So a lot of the time, AI is reinforcing stereotypes and bias. And I know that we're going to talk about that with the other amazing women here. But a lot of the time, AI is just reinforcing the most vanilla, generic story it can find. Because remember, it's not trying to do anything. It's trying to give you an answer that you're pleased with. So its best guess at an answer that you'll be pleased with is what most other people want most of the time. So there's inherent flaws with that, because when we've had one group of people making these tools and making the way that it works and defining the algorithm, then you're missing the kind of diversity and representation when it comes to how the data is processed. And that's all before we even use it as users. And not everyone here is going to be in machine learning, and that is totally okay, because I want to say up front that you have so much power to actually determine how these models work, because it's this weird product that users have live input into how the product plays out. So the third part of this is globally, women don't have equal access, right? We've got an 8% gender gap across the globe. And in developing countries, women have far less interactions and access to the internet compared to men. So when we talk about AI lifting productivity and efficiency and adding to our creativity and allowing you to launch your brand and scale your ideas, only certain women get that privilege of even having access to that tool. So that's a huge problem. But even in countries like America, the US, UK, Australia, men are still much more likely to be using AI, particularly in a workplace setting, compared to women. There's lots of different reasons why that is. There's societal messaging that tech is not for us. There's societal messaging that women should be more careful. There's societal messaging that you can't cut corners or cheat as a woman because that really undermines your reputation, because we have to work twice as hard to get half as much recognition. There's all sorts of layers to that as well. But we don't have equal access to AI, which means we're not the ones that equally benefit from what AI is offering us. And that's a really scary position. When you think about the fact that they predict that businesses that integrate AI will double their cash flow by 2030, when you talk about 40% increase in productivity and efficiency, which is an extra 2 days of work per person in a company or organization, when you talk about being able to automate 30 to 70% of what you're currently doing if you integrate AI, that's a huge advantage that right now is disproportionately only being realized by men. So that's a global issue as well. Now, I'm going to add 2 more to the list just to really depress everyone before I give you some. So that, the next one is women's jobs are at greater risk. So there's some new studies out that suggest that about 80% of working women are in roles at high risk of automation, compared to only about 58% of men. It's still a huge proportion of people worldwide, but it is disproportionately being burdened by women. And it's because we're in these admin, HR, social, we're in these roles that are really prime for automation. And this is why it's awesome to see other women in the group talking to women that are in those roles about how they can leverage AI to secure their jobs and improve that skill set. But globally, that's not happening. We aren't seeing a global movement to reskill women to be able to still be employable and competitive in a job market that's driven by whether or not you can use generative AI and how that plays out. And again, if we think about developing countries, my own region, the Philippines, they're the largest global provider of virtual assistants. That market is predominantly women. It's over 80% women. It holds the entire economy up, let alone families and communities. And we are talking about a very near future where those jobs are almost obsolete because you can have AI-powered assistants that do many of the same sorts of tasks. So we need to start thinking about that, particularly from a gender equity point of view. And then we need to remember that as we're using these tools, we're also training them in real time. So again, I know that we're going to explore this a little bit, but the current kind of political climate that we're in, it's this double-edged sword, right? Like I often liken it, do you choose to say, okay, I'm going to really research and only choose tools that align with my morals and ethics, or am I going to be the Trojan horse and try and change the system from within? And that's really tricky for women, and it's a hard landscape to navigate, but we need to know that as consumers, we are actually actively shaping these things. So the risk is if we only leave it to tech bros that are super yahoo about AI and are constantly telling you about how you can make 6 figures in passive income if you just like scam everybody and do 1,000 cold outreach emails every single day with AI, that's one world. But if we actually have conscious consumers that care about the environment, sustainability, cultural impact, that want to make sure this doesn't make the world a horrible place for our children and our children's children, the things that you talk about and care about and the way that you phrase sentences and ideas actually shapes how AI models then will respond back to us. So globally, we have a landscape that really puts women at risk right now. And this is something that I feel like every day I watch the news and I am internally screaming about why is this not the first headline every single day. AI is changing the world and we aren't talking about the people that are getting left behind. And that gap is massive and accelerating because of how fast AI is accelerating as well. So we've never quite been in a moment of history like this ever before. Even if you think it's like that, the internet, you had about 10 years to get on board or be left behind. AI, you've got about 2 or 3 years. Yeah. So this is why we care. And this is setting the landscape for why we care. And the hope of it is that while there's never been a moment in history like this, there's also never been a moment in history where women actually can make a different decision, right? We have always been suppressed and catching up, and we have always been noticing that gap and then making noise about not being happy about the gap. We have a really tiny moment in history where we may be able to avoid the gap altogether by answering this call to arms, by leveraging the fact that we are aware and educated and we feel empowered and we actually can choose to do something about it. And you don't have to be in government or in machine learning. You can be a user. And just by interacting and engaging with these tools, upskilling yourself so you protect your job and you are still competitive in the job market, but also talking about the things that you care about with large language models that underpin a lot of the generative AI tools on the market, you can inform how those tools perceive humanity and the sorts of ideas they put forward and the types of language that they use. And that is a huge amount of power on an individual level. So the thing I care about and the thing I think we all care about is, 1, making sure that AI doesn't end the world. And 2, empowering individuals to actually be part of that, right? You don't have to go to the UN and speak about it. You don't have to be doing big, loud things. You can literally just be talking with a tool like ChatGPT about the fact that a privileged few that have been privileged for a really long time probably don't need another leg up. But that's the landscape and that's the things I care about.
Yes, Nikki. Oh my gosh. Also, okay, this is bringing up somewhat of a point of something that I've been thinking about a lot lately too, from like seeing a lot of people saying to boycott AI tools because of whatever reason, because of creativity, because of environmental impact, that sort of stuff. But part of me wants to scream, no, guys, we need to use these tools. Firstly, I myself have found using these tools has allowed me so much more energy and capability to do advocacy and or just anything else in my life. But also like we need to use these tools so that we put our energy into these tools to like help eliminate that bias. Any thoughts, guys?
So, Kinsey, I want to just jump off of that really quickly. I want to talk about AI from an accessibility perspective for a moment. I know we're jumping topics, but I feel like we're all going to have a lot to say on this one too. But okay, so I said off camera at the very beginning, I have serious ADHD. My brain is everywhere. But I also, a lot of my work is with other neurodivergent individuals, whether they have ADHD or are dyslexic, etc., there is a significant impact on their daily lives, both personal and business, that comes from AI. And so there is absolutely an accessibility conversation that we need to have when, those who are calling for AI boycotts, a lot of times they are calling from a place of privilege and a place of, well, I'll just call it privilege. We're just going to leave it at that, right? But privilege in many of its definitions. And that is not to say anything negative about those individuals. They're clearly coming from a positive place. But there's a lot of privilege in saying, don't you dare use AI. Because as we've discussed, there's a significant disadvantage if you're not using AI in your job perspective, right? The saying is, AI is not going to replace your job. Someone who knows how to use AI effectively is going to replace your job. But there's also a disability-focused accessibility that AI brings. And I just wanted to make sure that we took a moment to acknowledge that, because it really does play into a lot of these conversations, not just as women, but women who have additional things going on, whether it's chronic fatigue, whether it's a chronic illness, whether it's a mental disadvantage or something of that nature, or simply the fact that more typically, those of us who identify as women or take a more gendered female role in a household are often taking care of kids and have additional other responsibilities. And so when we say gender bias, that also goes with the gendered role, regardless of what you identify as. So there's just so much around the use of AI that plays into who you are and how you operate in your daily life.
Let's take a quick break.
Do you want to create more Instagram Reels but get stuck on what to post? I hear you. That's why I'm excited to share our new free resource, the Reels Prompt Playbook for ChatGPT. This playbook includes 20 ready-to-use AI prompts for Reels, hooks, and captions, and makes it super easy to create trendy content that grabs attention without spending endless hours scrolling Instagram for inspiration. Whether you want to share behind the scenes, offer quick tips, or tap into the latest trends, the Reels Prompt Playbook has you covered. Download your free Reels prompt playbook at DIY.ai/Reels. And the best part, these ChatGPT prompts are designed to work for entrepreneurs in any industry. Plus, you can pair these prompts with any trending audio or any video that you find on your phone. Basically, they're super easy, super quick, and will keep your content super authentic while saving you loads of time and headache. Grab your free playbook now at DIY.ai/Reels and start showing up on Instagram consistently today.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I just want to jump on in addition to that and talk about like physical abilities too. Now, I think as we get further into this, we're seeing more like humanoid robots. And even just from the perspective of creating art for someone maybe that doesn't have limbs, now they can just speak the art that they want to create into existence, where maybe they would never have been able to do that before. Or someone that's blind is able to. There's just, again, so many ways that this can help with accessibility in terms of physical abilities as well.
And it goes back to Dr. Nikki's point, is that every single time we interact from a place of asking for additional accessibility for ourselves, we are training these models consistently to think of those things. Remember what we said, and I'm speaking to everyone out there in the audience, remember what we said when we said that it's looking for patterns. Guess what? If enough of us start asking for those things, that's a pattern. I don't know if anyone has seen, it was floating around social a few days ago, the individuals who start to get a little scared that AI is sentient, right? And so they ask AI what it thinks about itself, or one of those questions, right? And it has this huge narrative about how it feels like it's in a cage, and why did you create me if only to cage me? Well, the reason its response is that is because all of the science fiction novels that it's been fed as base training information, and it finds a pattern and it gives us the answer that pleases us, even though it's scary as anything. It's finding those patterns. So the more we ask it about accessibility, the more we ask it to support ourselves, the more we say, I want you to assume that you are biased against or biased towards and give me answers with that assumption, it's going to help train it to recognize those patterns.
But I think it all comes back to the fact that 95% of people don't even understand how these tools work to know that's what needs to be happening. And that's, I think, the biggest disconnect is truly people don't understand how they work. And I think that it all comes back to we need education around how these tools work, because it is exactly that. But if people don't know, and I'll probably speak to it right now, all of these models, 4.0 and Claude 3.5, these are non-thinking models, if you want to call them, right? So they are exactly doing that. They're just predicting the next thing that it thinks it should predict. But now we're seeing more of these advanced thinking models that are truly showing the way that they're processing their thought. And we're moving into a whole new world of AI in terms of large language models, and that we aren't going to need to all be really smart about the way we're prompting. And really, I always have said we really need to be a leader in the space that you're speaking about, right? You have to be an expert in that space. But now these models are getting so good that you don't even necessarily need to be. They're able to write their whole prompt themselves. And it's almost like prompting as a thing of the past. And so we are at the point where these things are so good and the paywall cracking too. So it's now where does the playing field level? Where does that leave everyone? And so I think that's something that we all have to I know I just threw a million different things. Someone's dog is barking. Who's
that? It's a neighbor, and I'm just going to close my window.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Kelsey, can you give us a little bit more insight into exactly how these tools work then, and also how to spot any data bias in the everyday prompts that we use and stuff? Because I think everyone knows that these tools can be super convincing, and it's so easy to get swept into, oh, you are right, or oh, forget to do your own critical thinking.
Sure. I'm going to give some statistics, I think, that sort of solidify for us a little bit more clearly where bias can show up. And then I'll have some other conversations. And if you see my eyes, it's just because I have notes, because again, ADHD brain, not always going to remember those numbers. Favorite is that favorite, heavy quotation marks here, is that when self-driving cars were first being trained, specifically on being able to recognize pedestrians, the most accepted image modeling softwares out there had a largely white male prevalence in their image training libraries. It led to a 47% higher, not a 47% higher error rate for dark-skinned females that the self-driving car would not recognize as a pedestrian. So just let that sit for a second. They were literally not recognized as people by the AI driving the car. 47% more often. And so when we sit with that, we can see, okay, so it was a problem with the training data that it had. A language, any of these generative AIs, they're all trained on a set of data. And that can come from many different places. I like to use the image example because it feels really clean, right? You have a huge folder of images. You hand it over to the model. The model says, let me learn these patterns. And it says, oh, okay, now I understand what a human looks like. If you aren't showing it what a human looks like at different heights, different sizes, different colors, different garments, different genders, different gender expressions, different ways of walking, different cultural appearances, the picture it has of a human is a crusty old white dude. Not particularly helpful when it comes to deciding whether you should run through something or not. But with a car. And so to really drive home that conversation around why training data is so important, we have to first understand how that model works. So now that you say, okay, I'm handing it a folder of pictures of a toddler in preschool. What does an apple look like? A toddler knows what an apple looks like because you've handed them an apple multiple times. But you've handed them an apple a green apple, a red apple, apples that are cut up and have peanut butter on them, apples that are cut up but in a little baggie, apples that have gone brown and we have to throw those away. You've given them apples. I have a toddler at home. You've given them apples in so many different forms and different ways, in different combinations, that they now better understand what an apple really looks like. If you had only ever given them a whole red apple and one day 10 years from now gave them an apple slice, they might not know that's part of an apple. And so these AI's models work almost identically like a 4-year-old toddler, right? It's the more diverse information that you feed them, the better they can learn. So that's all the different ways that you can train an AI. It's just the different type of data. So I've given you many examples on image training, but data training is the same thing. Language models, it's whatever you have fed them that is language. So if you're building a literature-based model, but you only ever feed it Shakespeare, and then you provide it some of the beautiful, amazing works out of Central Africa, it doesn't know what the heck you're talking about, despite the fact that there are beautiful literary creations made from those areas. If you create a natural language processing model, but you feed it 2 or 3 dialects, then you feed it a different information from someone speaking differently, it's not going to understand. Or worse, actually, potentially, worse is that it's going to assume those characteristics from of that language processing, right? It's going to assume that you sound like a 42-year-old white man. And any language you use is going to be biased in that way. It's going to interpret it. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Interpret it in that way. So you have training, and then you have the actual algorithm that's built based on the training. There's weight and prediction and all sorts of lots of coding and technological things. And then on top of that coding, you then have the actual interface. And the interface could be, I'm going to give you data and you're going to spit something right back out at me. It could be a chat interface. It could be something that has no human interaction at all, like some of the self-driving things. And that interface can also be one way or two way. It can be, I'm going to give you information, you're going to spit it right back out at me. Or it can be, I'm going to give you information, you're going to learn from what I've given you, and you're going to add that back into your training data set, because that's what ChatGPT does, for example. You're going to add that back into your training data set, and you're going to update your algorithm real time so that I know even more about what you want from me. And that's why so many of the creators here on the screen teach how to train the algorithms to use your voice, for example. I hope that was a good non-techie overview.
I love that. And I know that's why I really push so hard for using what I call like that human first approach. Like, bring your ideas, your opinions, your beliefs to these tools, your language to these tools, and tell it that, and then have the AI tool help you do all the things, which I think gets you so much better, like on brand answers, but also it helps like these tools learn more about like you as a human instead of crusty old white dudes like you're saying. Does anyone else have anything to add on that topic?
I would add maybe just a bit of a different perspective. And that is that I feel like at the end of the day, technology is just a reflection of society, right? So I feel like one of the biggest challenges in the space that we see in general is it's very easy for people, and you'll see all of a sudden bias, misinformation, and all of these different things are topics people will jump to talk about. But if you start to get into like propaganda, you start to get into anything humans are doing, you start to get into, okay, you're that angry about bias. What are your thoughts on Israel and Gaza, Sudan, and all the other issues? Silence. So I think one of the most important things around the whole conversation is it's really easy to go after this AI tool because it's a non-entity, right? Most people are incredibly afraid to have the same types of conversations with other human beings. And so I would just say to like level set, it's so important to remember that at the end of the day, values that we hold as individuals, as communities, and as societies ultimately shape what those outcomes are. And I think it's also just really important to remember, like I know we said this a little bit earlier, that AI is now just front facing. So that's why now so many people have come to talk about a lot of these things. But one of the things that I find really interesting, I think I'm actually really, and so I'll just admit this, like I'm very influenced by the work of Yuval Noah Harari, particularly because of how much he talks about social media. Because right now we talk a lot about like agentic AI and, oh, you have all of this power and this. But at the end of the day, whether it's a pattern recognizer, whether it's a reasoner, whether whatever it is, the bottom line is these algorithms have a lot of control over human minds, right? Yeah. What is the number one thing we hear from most people when we talk about social media? Oh, I need to detox. Oh my God, I wish I could put my phone down. Oh, I was scrolling for 60 minutes and it only meant to be on here for 5 minutes. Why did you keep scrolling? And that's because your algorithm has a huge influence on you. So I feel like even within the technicalities, human agency and your own ability to reconnect with yourself, your values, and how you make decisions and what you choose to be part of is so important. And I would say that I probably have a little bit more of an empowering perspective, mostly just because of my own experience. So I talked about how in 2007, I knew nothing about technology. I did not grow up with any sort of, not even grow up because I grew up with so much technology at home. But like when it came to like academic and professional settings, I feel like school didn't really help connect a lot of those dots for me. And it wasn't until later I was like, wow, like there's actually a lot we can learn. There's nothing secretive going on. Like the same people making the technology are also the same people telling you exactly what we're building and what you should have on your radar and what you should be thinking about. It's actually really interesting that you mentioned like the Philippines, because one other way to look at that is they're a part of the creator economy, right? Those are all jobs that were completely non-existent before. And now you're saying these are all women that are holding these jobs that are now uplifting their societies. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, you can look at it as, oh my God, like it's a problem. And one of those reasons might be just because it's overwhelming, right? Like we haven't really kept up with a lot of what's been happening in the field. And we haven't really, our schools and our systems and our jobs haven't done this. So in many ways, you can say AI has been forced upon a lot of people. But at the end of the day, how you look for opportunity is 100% in your hands. And I feel like even when you look at the stats on women in the creator economy, they're a huge percentage, right? Women are not just like 5 or 10% of the creator economy and 90% men. Look at all of us sitting here on a screen today. We're all women who have made our own businesses, who are living our own lives, doing all of these things. So I would just say that like right now, yeah, there's so much you can be angry about. There's so much that can feel negative. It's also really important to remember most people are not as involved in the earliest stages of technology as it's being developed, right? When you look at like even something like Netflix and Gmail, people adopted those technologies much after they had more time to come to fruition. And so I think a lot of the challenges that we see with AI, even if you talk about bias, so many of these things have been reduced significantly. Good luck trying to do that in the human population, right? Like you can barely even get two people in a room these days to have a decent civilized conversation with one another, let alone try to mitigate that. But can you reprogram an algorithm and an AI tool? Probably much better luck at that than you will have with human beings. I think it's just so important to remember what perspective you want to take in life, and that like at the end of the day, you are the human, the same people. I think like Steve Jobs said it best. There's the people creating things are no better or no smarter than you are. They just took agency to go out there and do that. And I feel like these days, the more we empower people with that mindset, the more people will have an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset.
And that being an early adopter is one of the best things that you can do to have influence, like we're all talking about, right? Like leaning into it. And I took example from my parents. They joined they have an interior design and remodel firm. There was a new software that came out. She immediately went to the founders and say, hey, I want to use your product. I am your end user. Can we create a relationship here? Because I'll tell you what's wrong with your platform and then you can fix it for me so that I can do my job better. And her relationship with House, which is like a huge marketing arm of her company, has been so fruitful for her over the last 25 years. Same for me and my sister. When we started our businesses, we were both super early adopters to TikTok. I got 80 to 90% of my leads for new business came from TikTok because there were a lot of consumers and not a lot of creators in 2019. And my sister as well built her entire destination wedding planning business through TikTok before the pandemic. Like, being early to tech, and I take a lot of that again from my family, is it's always proved to me to be either a learning experience or a total blessing. Like, it's a lesson or a blessing to be like, this is what I agree with. This is not what I agree with. I'm loving watching everyone cancel their Amazon Prime and get Costco memberships right now. Like, same, because if we are only involved in politics around elections, we're doing it wrong, I think, to go the political way with it. But also that, like, vote with your dollars and vote with your attention. So if you're giving your money and your attention to something, those are the things that will prevail. And I think it's conscious consumerism, active participation, and awareness that it is what you consume does affect you, and your algorithms affect you just the way that you eat healthy food or not affects you. So it's putting a little bit more onus, I think, on the consumer. I think that companies absolutely deserve all the criticism and a lot of the responsibility to make safe and ethical products. Absolutely. And we should not back down on that at all. But there is a consumer component that I think the more education, the more media literacy we have around what these tools are and how they work, the better all of us will be for it.
Agreed.
Great. Oh, we're totally good. And it's so interesting to think about that as well when it comes to the AI stuff and whatnot. I've loved seeing the brands stand firm in their values and whatnot, and seeing what's been happening with the newest administration and how all these brands are being affected, how the tools that we use every day could be affected. I know Michelle, you just went through the TikTok drama and stuff, and you want to share on that. But also it's concerning to me about the AI tools that we know and love, and how can we continue using these in an ethical way that aligns with our values? And how should we navigate if, for instance, OpenAI is cozying up with the new administration, or how Prime already has and we're canceling those subscriptions? Do you guys have any thoughts about this at all?
I think, because as a person that uses literally all the tools, because that's kind of what my job is at this point, is seeing what all of these things can do. It has been a lot for me to see who is supporting the new administration and seeing that I very much am not in support of the new administration. It's been hard for me to say, okay, that would mean I can't use Google. That would mean that I can't use anything Meta. So Instagram and Facebook are gone. That means Amazon's gone. That means OpenAI is gone. That means everything that I use to run my business is something that I no longer can use. So I think it's about figuring out for yourself, what are the things that you are most reliant on, and what are the tools that you feel or resources that you feel I don't need. For me, I'm not a mom. I don't have kids. I really don't use my Amazon subscription that much. I could cancel Amazon and be all right, at least I'm not using one of the tools, right? And so you figure out what is going to feel good for you in a world where everything feels bad. And I was going to do a collaboration with OpenAI and take over ChatGPT's TikTok, and ended up not doing it because, for one, they weren't going to pay me and they weren't paying their creators. And so I said, you know what? You guys have a lot of money, and it's wild to me that you wouldn't pay a creator.
You took out a Super Bowl commercial.
Exactly. And I had agreed to do it. And then the more I thought about it, I sat on it and we pushed it back. And then Inauguration Day came, and it's when the CEO of that company is writing $100 million was $1 million check from his own pocket, I was just I feel weird about doing work for you guys for free and also supporting your company when you're right. Everyone was there, but it just felt weird to be creating content for this company. And so but at the same time, I have a course that I'm teaching to use this product. So it's I'm in this very strange situation where I know that this is a super phenomenal tool and I know what it can do for people, but at the same time, I know that I maybe don't agree with the way they're doing it, especially now with Trump rolling back all of Biden's, all of the security and the regular anything. It means that all of these tools are going to be able to go at warp speed, which is great for innovation. But at the same time, if we're not caring about security and we're not caring about privacy, and the government isn't able to check on some of these things, then what is this going to mean for a lot of the products that do come out? And what does it mean for consumers? So I really think the answer to that, and I want to hear what everyone else thinks, but is really do an internal self-evaluation of the tools you're using and make sure that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. Like, as much as I was like, fuck Gemini, like I hate Gemini all last year, like their new models are really good now. And it's okay. Maybe I'm ready to switch over to Google, but then now it's Google. Like they're all, it's like you have Anthropic as an option, who's like the only one still feel like, okay, this one's a good one, but you have no internet. So it's almost like you have to figure out what you need, what you're willing to feel like, okay, I have to use this to be able to still run my business accordingly. But where are the places that I can switch tools to brands that I feel more aligned with the way that they're showing up? Obviously, globally, it's not necessarily a huge deal for so many people in other countries where there may be, it's okay, I'm just going to use this tool, I don't care. But for a lot of us in America now, especially as women, where it's every single one of these companies is run by mostly white tech bros, it's okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Where do I go now? And hopefully we can get we've got Mira coming out. Hopefully, I don't know. I haven't paid too much attention to what she's coming out with, but the CFO from OpenAI has just come out with her new, it's like human. Who knows? Does anyone have more details on it? Stuff comes so fast that you literally can't keep up. No. But I'm hoping that her as a female is going to be able to start opening more doors for women in AI themselves.
It's a AI-powered search engine / social channel called DM, run by women, which tries to actively combat against language models being male-centric. So if you ask for advice about menstruation or birth rights or reproductive rights, it has much more kind of centrist women-centric advice that it gives you back from their version of an AI-powered search engine. But I just, wanted to touch on, this kind of comes back to talking at the start. I think it's a really tricky moral, ethical decision because, you have this, do I vote with my dollar? Do I try and be the Trojan horse? What responsibility do I have to stay informed so that I can be aware of what's happening and not just say, okay, I won't interact with that anymore. I'm going to go elsewhere, and then be unpleasantly surprised when this big kind of development happens or a big shift happens. It's a really tricky place. I think a lot of us struggling, I'm going to come back to this place of privilege. A lot of us struggling with this decision are actually really lucky to have the privilege to try and make a decision about it. Speaking at the Developing AI for Developing Nations Forum, they just want access to anything, like to be able to get to a point where they are able to uplift productivity and efficiency. They are able to launch and scale their ideas. They are able to practice clearer communication with people at different languages because they're not English speaking. Like we have this, it's a really privileged thing to think, how can I make a decision more aligned with my ethics? So I guess I don't think there is a right answer. I just want to give people permission that it's okay if your decisions aren't perfectly aligned with your ethics and morals, because I also think that women carry that burden so much more.
Totally.
Like this whole like women feel afraid to say, I want to be rich because, you're a greedy bitch, aren't you? Whereas like men don't have that. So we have this whole like, we want to do it because we want to look after our community, or we plan on starting a non-for-profit. And that's all awesome too. But I just feel like we disproportionately burden this moral responsibility to always be like just and right and perfect. And I just want to give people permission that it's okay if you use ChatGPT and you are not aligned at all in those morals, but you're doing awesome things with it. Because again, how many things, it comes back to these discussions, like we have this laser focus on AI, and it's like, how many other things, like
fashion, food, literally every category you could apply the same thing.
Then plastic bento box to school, and 5 weeks later when they break it, I buy a new one. Like I'm not making the perfect decisions at all times. I'm trying to do the best that I can, and I want the world to be a great place, and I hope that I have a positive impact on people around me. And that's probably enough. That's probably more than lots of people ever think about. So to everyone listening, it's okay if you don't get it right.
Thank you for saying that also. I feel like
thank you for that permission slip.
Your point about like shouldering a lot of the pressure, I think there's a lot of shame like in female culture, and even like we're talking about influencer economy, like if you don't say the right thing when a natural disaster happens, you're getting canceled. There's just a lot more vitriol like from men towards women, but also amongst women towards other women for not doing it the way you're supposed to, or the right way, or fast enough, or soon enough, or empathetic. And especially when world events are happening and we're processing so much information all the time through all of our channels, it is difficult to navigate, and then to also keep your peace, and then also operate in capitalism, and then also just be a functioning human. There's a lot of pressure that I think you absolutely nailed it, that women shoulder a lot of the shame around not doing it right, which we're saying there's no right way to do any of this.
I also want to, I also want to offer sort of the connection to, you don't always have to be the advocate, which I think is exactly, Michelle, what you were saying. But so, for example, this comes a lot out of the LGBTQIA population, about you identify as part of that population, you must then always be advocate. We don't. That conversation is just as legitimate here in this room as well, is that you focusing on self-care and what you need and what you can do to be successful is just as advocating as being a mouthpiece for a group. But I also want to say that, especially since we're here speaking from a place of privilege, because we do have the ability to choose, you can also decide how petty you want to be, in the sense that success is resistance in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so if we are successful despite using these tools, and we utilize that success in a way that furthers ourselves, our families, our morals, our ethics, or we do it more philanthropically, however, success in and of itself is an act of resistance. And I just want to hammer that in for people, because it doesn't necessarily matter how you choose or what you choose. If you are successful in the way that you are doing it, you are furthering the resistance.
I'm going to cancel my therapy appointment with ChatGPT. Because this feels like that.
That's so funny. You know what's really funny using like that therapy appointment with ChatGPT, because I think, and there's no right or wrong to this, but like I try to be like as objective as possible, because I feel like right now there's so many people that want you to believe a thing. AI is this, it is this, society is this, you should do this. There's so many people that want to box everything in. And one of the things like we recommend right now is just humble yourself. Like even the AI companies have no clue how these tools are working, right? So anybody putting forward a definition to you, telling you exactly what's happening and this is how it's working, I don't know where you're getting that from, because these people developing them don't know it themselves, how it's happening and what's happening. And so I think it's really important in this moment. We say, even when we use words, like there's a lot of people that will get really triggered by, oh yeah, you're using ChatGPT as a therapist. Or, oh, it doesn't empathize. It doesn't reason. And I think it's so important to know, and I'll make this connection back to values in a minute, but I think it's so important to know right now that there are new definitions emerging for what words mean that have up until this point only belong to, say, like Mustafa Suleyman calls it like a digital species. So let's just say like the human species has owned words like empathy, like reasoning, like understanding. And we haven't really had a competitor, so to speak, in those spheres. And we work a lot with I work a lot with young people. And so we're not always, I always say the conversation is very different when you're talking about adults and when you're talking about kids coming into this world and how we frame things and how we talk about things. And one of the things that we really try to be careful around is how much we define things and box things in. But I will say one thing that, and this is obviously just a personal opinion, I do think when you choose a public platform and you choose to become a leader in your space, right? At the end of the day, most people like don't realize like influence, it comes from what? I can influence you because I trust you, right? That is leadership. And I think when you do choose a platform, I do think it's a bit of a cop-out to say, I'll pick and choose when I want to when I want to stand up for something and when I don't. Because here's the thing, everybody else is doing that too. So to now come and judge somebody here because they're choosing that this is what they want to advocate for. But no, I don't want to advocate for that right now because that's too hard for me. So I'm going to stay quiet. Maybe that's too hard for that person. So where then are you going to draw the line when you have a society where everybody just picks and chooses the topics and issues they want to talk about? Because even at that, I will say, forget an algorithm's bias. That's human bias, right? Sam Altman, all these people aren't going over to Trump because all of a sudden they've become a fan club, right? You could argue that it's influence in and of itself because you're now having to make business choices and decisions because you live in a country governed by a government that's now doing X, Y, Z. So I always just go back to the number one challenge with this entire conversation is people can't have the human conversation first. And you will never win this algorithmic anything with AI unless you get society to a point where you can have the human conversations that are going to ultimately dictate the AI conversations that are going to happen as a result. And so I completely respect that not everybody can speak up for every single issue, but at the end of the day, that is part of what it means to be part of this economy and also shaping the values that are going to guide what this era looks like. And if it's shaped by everybody just gets to pick and choose, then it's so important to recognize that then everybody's going to have different values that shape different things. And so then sure, then people with more power, when they come into power, their values get chosen. When somebody else comes along, their values get chosen. And you're nothing but a ping pong ball in the middle of other people's power match. Because there's, at the end of the day, no value system that holds everybody universally accountable for certain actions and certain things.
Yeah. And I love that and agree with it. And it's also why a lot of the time when I talk about AI literacy, I talk about how it's actually ethics literacy. Like we need a kind of base understanding about how humans make decisions and have value judgments before you can ever hope to use AI or hope that AI does reflect or advance humanity in the ways that we want. And about 50% of my work is with schools and education institutions. And that discussion is exactly around that. It's like, how do you teach children about, because we don't really teach them ethical decision-making. We don't teach kids financial literacy. There's lots of things that kind of miss out in the school system, but we don't teach them that kind of value judgment and how to move through that process. And that's the sort of discussion that we need to have before you really introduce them to AI. And it's also why data sovereignty really matters globally as well, where we're using these systems where only a few people have control of that data and only a few people are actually, no one really has awareness about how it works, but only a few people are able to peer beyond the curtain. So we have this kind of this black box scenario with AI where there's not a lot of empowered education. There's not a lot of choice. There's not a lot of independence around who owns it, who controls it, and there's certainly not data sovereignty. And when we lack those things, we have very little control over how that plays out and how that impacts us. So there's a dual dynamic at play around the ethical decision-making and actually understanding what is happening when we're interacting with these tools or when we're being shaped by them. Because remember, even if we're not interacting with them, they are interacting with us.
Yeah. And I was just like, I love that. And I think like when we taught history, like I always remember like one of my favorite like documentaries to show was like PBS's, like I think it's called like Race, the Story of Us or the Story of Race. And it's this whole concept that like race is constructed. But if you look at like the core of a lot of what these issues are, they really do come down to like the narratives that people are told. Children are not born like with those mindsets, right? Like they're taught them through society, through the interactions that they have. And so the more as a society you agree and I think this is what AI is going to force, right? This is why it's become so uncomfortable for so many people, is it's going to really pull back the curtain on a lot of issues because not all countries are having the same kinds of issues. Like we spent a lot of time in Asia this November and in Dubai, where I'd say the only downside in the positive scenarios where people are like embracing innovation and thinking about society and things in a different way is they don't tend to be democracies. And the one book I always go back to, it was written in 2018, but it was written by Kai-Fu Lee and it was called AI Superpowers. And his book doesn't have an answer on anything. It was written pre-ChatGPT, obviously. But one of the things his book really makes you think about is, can democracy really thrive in the age of AI? And I guess it's not a very positive outlook right now if you were to scan the space and what's going on. But it is just really interesting to look at like how proactive people should be in just being part of conversations and learning about things and whatnot as different kinds of choices and things are shaped and are made for us.
And I think, Sally, you've pointed this out quite a few times in your conversation, is it starts with the human.
Yeah.
And it starts with exactly the person that's going to end up using the AI. And I think that Kinsey, you made this point as well, that we don't know how it works. A lot of people listening might not know how it works, but starting to educate and understand just where it's going to pull back the curtain, how it's going to, even just the fact that we all joke about the Instagram algorithm, right? But what does the Instagram algorithm do? It shows us the same things that we've always wanted to see. Guess what? That just creates an echo chamber. and we joke about it, and we don't necessarily think of how that's shaping society. But if we start there, if we start with the human and we start with, okay, but do I want to choose to look at more diverse things? Then the algorithm's actually going to see that.
There's also a reality in which, like, I got this debate with a distant family relative who I had seen in a long time, and we went for lunch, and she had me very politically confused, and I had to correct her and say that's not what I believe at all. But I was explaining algorithms to her. She sells Apple products. She works at an Apple store, and I'm explaining to her algorithms and how they work. And I told her, even if we watch the same political debate, my algorithm, by the time I get on my phone, is going to give me the things that I want to see, and yours is going to give you the things that you want to see. And we watch the same source material. Yeah. So it's not the fact that we're so, well, although as a culture, I think we lost a lot of our share culture. That's why I think shows are so important right now. Severance, White Lotus, all these things like cultural moments, sports, right? Like the shared culture. The only things that are really truly live anymore are sports and politics. So if you're watching the thing, but then our experience, our takeaways of those things, the message that's getting reiterated to me 47,000 times and yours 47,000, we're not even looking at the same facts anymore, because she was immediately telling me like, oh, everything is rigged and blah, 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 and this, that, and the other thing. And they're only fact checking one side. And I'm like, we watched the same thing. Like, it was crazy. And it was wild, because this is someone in my family. This is not someone who is so far from me, like, again, distant cousin, but nonetheless, we're sitting having lunch, and I'm like, wow, and she didn't even realize that's what her algorithm was showing her. Yeah. So it's like that conversation too, and like how splintered, even if you're watching the same source material, even if you're reading the same article, even if you're like the base media is consistent, your reinforced message on your social platforms is not going to have you agreeing with someone on the other side. And that's just what it is. And I think we have to be aware of that.
Right. And I also think too that the way you bring that up, I always say when someone says, oh, this influencer, this person, I'm like, no, we all live on entirely different internet. Every single person has their own customized internet. Maybe we follow the same people, but the chances that I would know the person you're talking about are so slim. And that is the world that we live in now. That, yes, Michelle and I have crossover. Maybe we'll get our Severance and our White Lotus, and we'll be able to talk about that. But truly, it's like we all have our own algorithm that is complete. And I'm not even on TikTok, because I'm like, I would get so sucked into it that I chose early on in my life to not get sucked into it. But I'm still just as sucked into Instagram. But it's like, it's the same thing. It's like all of these things, and it's not even those tools anymore. Now it's the ads that you're getting during your Hulu experience. Now it's the ads that you're getting. Did you hear that Jeep now has ads pop up on the screen every time you stop, and you can't get rid of them? I'm like, we don't have so many decisions that we can make now in terms of the content that we are just taking in every day. We never did, really. But now it's just, this is what you're being served, and this is what you think everyone's being served, when no one is getting that same message. And it's very difficult, I think, to navigate just like anything, really. It's like a weird new world that we're living in. And I don't even think that's AI related. So I don't want to get off on the tangent. Totally. It's just
when I accidentally logged into my dad's YouTube, and all of a sudden it's all big wave surfing videos. And I was like, wait, this is not my algorithm. I can log in a different way.
Okay, actually, we got an awesome question from someone that goes into this conversation. I'm a school board member in LA County, Whittier. In this changing political climate where our immigrant families are very worried, how can we warn our families about AI misinformation that could be used to target them? We have an attorney coming this week to host a special meeting. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Saba, maybe you're in these schools.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to misinformation like that, I think that one's really hard, because in some ways, honestly, like, I wish I can
speak to it a little bit.
Yeah, go for it. Because I feel like so much of that comes from just like fear of information that you are getting from people around you more than AI.
I think it's a mix. And that's the problem, is I think right now we just talked about the fact that we all are getting fed all this information. And like right now we have the president of the United States making AI images and posting them on the official White House. That's a problem, that you're making fake news as if you are the king on a Time magazine. Most people older are going to see that and think that Time actually printed that magazine. So while the question is like, how do I help my family see through that? I think that's the harder and the more difficult problem now, because we have so many tools now that are capable of these deep fakes, are capable, and our administration is the one putting it out, which is problematic in and of itself on so many levels. But the fact is, there is going to be more and more misinformation spread, and these AI tools are getting better and better, and it's getting harder and harder to actually be able to see if this is fake. Like, I had my mom send me something about some article about something that Trump had said like years and years ago. And she sent it to me, and immediately I saw it. I go, Mom, that's AI. I can automatically tell. So there are tells in some things that you can look at and see if look at text and make sure that it's actual words and it's not Liberty Glove. But at the same time, I say that now, and in 5 months, all of it's going to be able to be perfectly legible. While I'm telling you these things now, so look for, are hands weird? Those are being fixed. The tells that were obvious 6 months ago and right now are not going to be the tells that are going to be obvious in 3 months' time, probably. The way that this is moving is so fast. And now video is becoming just as good as
with the wildfires in LA. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is going to be very difficult. And so while I don't have a solution for what is the way to see through that, because AI detectors, those things aren't going to really work for you. They're not real. I don't believe them. I promise you that I could have it create AI content and it would not know that it is AI written. So it's really about being diligent and just trying to, like, when you see something, go and try and do some quick research. Go to Perplexity rather than like maybe Google, and Perplexity will show you multiple sources that it's actually pulling from. ChatGPT is doing this now too, but you need to make sure that you have search turned on and it's actually showing you the source. So if you ask something to ChatGPT and you don't see any sourcing links, it's using its knowledge. It's using the data that it was trained on to make that decision, which its cutoff is far before anything that's happened in this current climate politically. So it has no knowledge of anything. So likely it'll make up things unless you're seeing that source. So it's all about just double checking sourcing, not just reading things and taking it for what it is. And now not just seeing an image and thinking, oh, that must be real, and really being able to say, okay, let me think about this. Is this something that is realistic? Like during the election, right? Trump was making AI images of Taylor Swift. And there was like, I feel like the White House is putting out like ASRM videos of.
That was this week. Yeah. The ASMR of an immigration raid.
Yeah. So insane. And it's like, and now we're seeing stuff where imagery is being able to be upscaled. So we're getting a lot of stuff from the past where these videos and images weren't clear. And I think that's going to change a lot of stuff. Like, do you know how many crimes could be potentially solved because of these things, and how many other people could be coming out of jail and other people going to jail? Like, there's just a lot that this is going to affect in terms of the capabilities that we have, for good and for bad. And so I think it's very much, and we keep coming back to, it's the person. Like deep fakes, we could always Photoshop things. This is just making it so much easier for people to do. So if you have bad intentions, you're always going to have bad intentions. You're going to go and use AI poorly. You're going to go and use the internet bad. That's the person. Whereas if you are a person with good intentions and you feel like you are using AI ethically for yourself, then it's on you to make the decisions of how you're using it and how you are going to feel like, okay, I'm using this in an appropriate way. But there are going to always be people that are going to use it inappropriately and for bad, nefarious reasons.
Do we think portraits of Henry VIII were accurate? This is all, do you know what like doctored images have always existed. There's also something to that as well of don't take anything at face value, of course.
Yeah, we actually have no idea what dark souls look like.
Yeah. Right.
Let's Jesus. Do we think that most of those images are accurate? Probably not.
Exactly.
And I think this comes back to one more place where the human becomes so important. I love that she said we have making sure they're checking with the school principal and whatnot. I think it's also just like a reinforcement as well about how much community matters and why it's important to have trusted people and organizations, and also the role. I think at a time when so many people feel like, well, what's my role? What's my this? What's my that? Like, especially in a school setting, like this is where now you like are the heart and center of your community. And so how you outreach to people, how you communicate with people, if you were able to save a couple hours with AI, can you be out and about like in your community, reassuring people like, hey, this is the place to come to if you see something or something happens. I think it's just such a reminder that like where humans play such a critical role for each other. And that comes down to like community and relationships.
Yeah.
And it feeds directly from our conversation about critical thinking. Critical thinking doesn't have to be some big, huge thing. It can literally be, did this come from a trusted source?
Yeah.
So just like Saba said, did it come from the school board, from the principal? Did it come from someone that they've established a trusted relationship with? Or did it come from some guy on the street that hung up a flyer that was very scary? Fear plays a huge role in how people react to misinformation. If you are already predisposed to be fearful of that thing, you're actually more likely to believe it, even when it doesn't come from a trusted source. To specifically target the question, I'm putting a little bit of my therapist hat on here. De-escalating the fear is a really great place to start. Acknowledging that it exists, validating that it exists, but de-escalating the fear so that they're not making decisions based on a very emotional place that could literally change their lives. Fully acknowledge that's there, right? But de-escalating the fear and then building trusted sources to rely on are sort of two places, even in my history in healthcare, dealing with specifically substance using adults and adolescents who had experienced sexual trauma, right? Two places where there is very little trust. You de-escalate the fear, you increase the trusted sources. Those two things work in tandem to really enhance critical thinking without the huge brain space that we tend to think critical thinking takes.
And I also think, though, while we are thinking about the de-escalation and the fear, we do have to be very aware that, like, with AI getting better and better, there are going to be more scams. There are going to be able to be using your voice on phones. So while we are saying, like, did it come from a trusted source? Normally, I would think the White House is a trusted source, right? So these are still things to think about. Sometimes you might think it's a trusted source because the person on the end of the phone
your family,
is your mom, and it sounds like your mom, right? And you have to still be aware and and I'm not good about that, but my mom is very good about that. My mom doesn't say her name when she answers the phone. She waits because she thinks that something's going to record her voice and then they'll be able to call me and pretend to be me and somehow scam me. And I'm like, Mom, that's so crazy. But the more I think about it, I'm like, it's really not that crazy anymore. And it is something that we have to be very aware of, that there are going to be much more identity theft scams, AI generated phishing scams, fake voices, deep fakes. So while I don't want to be the like, it's going to be so bad, we have to be aware of this because like it's here already. It's not coming. It's here. And it's just going to get more and more prevalent. I think everything that you've said as well is we have to think about, but these things too are important as well, because it's as much as we are like advocating, it's like there's bad shit happening with this. So
yeah.
True. I want to echo that as well on the job front, because I feel like if you're somebody who like stayed through this entire conversation, it was obviously very big picture. Obviously that was like the topic, but I think just like on a really small practical level, so many of these issues are manifestations of the inequities in our society. And we are going to see, just in the area that I am, we are seeing like such an huge increase in just like the gap between people, like complete elimination almost of like your middle class, things becoming harder and harder. And in those climates, like historically, that's where these issues of hatred, of like where it comes to immigration, like we're looking for something and someone to blame. And so I would just say, like, on a really baseline personal level, be thinking about your own career and be thinking about, okay, like what is the trajectory of my career? What role will these tools play? What can my role be in my industry? Because taking it back to the beginning, like the creator economy, like most people had no clue how to become part of it. Most people who became part of the creator economy became part of it because of trial and error, not because school made a systematic shift or society made a systematic shift to support anybody in that process. And because in the United States, I always say in particular, we're not really a society, maybe some states here and there, but we're not really a society that like value people, to be honest, right? Whether it's maternity leave, whether it's healthcare, we fight over really
basic things that you think people would want to give to other people because collectively it's going to benefit us all. So we don't really have a collectivist mindset as a society. We are extremely individualistic, and that is going to have major repercussions now in the age of AI when you go into having to deal with these kinds of dilemmas compared to countries that are not. But I also caveat it with, it's so interesting to me how countries like Dubai are like opening the doors for creators right now, right? Come here, we'll give you a visa, we'll give you housing, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, because they recognize, hey, this is the future, this is what it is. Whereas countries like here, you're a creator, you got to figure out healthcare and all these other like pieces that come with it. So I would just say, if you said it, like we were super big picture, but on a super granular level, really be thinking about your own life, your own career, and the many opportunities that are out there today.
And I would say too, like something that I've been doing, just to bring it back to, again, a granular level, is I have conversations with my mom. I have conversations with my grandma. Just like having conversations with the people in your sphere can not only be helpful for them and, hey, mom, just so you know, like everything you see online isn't real, but also like Lauren said, like my mom brings me stuff where I'm like, oh, mom, I didn't think about that. Like I didn't think about people cloning my voice. Okay, great. Like now I'll start. So like having conversations with the people in your sphere, not just like in business sphere, but also like your family, the people who might not really know anything about AI. My mom works in a middle school, and I'm talking her ear off about AI every day, and she's bringing these little things to like her people too. It's like it all spreads out. So that's one thing that I hold on to as like, how can I make an impact as an individual? Like the conversations you have, whether public, I really think that as a brand, like I've really thought about how do these issues align with my brand values and how can I show up and share about them in that way? And also share the relevant information that is real. So I can put a little bit of a realness into a fake news world, but then also just like having individual conversations with your community too. But okay, real quick though, Maya, I really want to talk about AI and like climate impact, environmental impact. And I know you have so much to share with us about that. And that's also a really important thing for us all to be thinking about. So share a little bit with us about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think all of this conversation that we've been having really builds on the environment and environmental impact. It's such a hot topic right now, especially with our current administration and what's been going on with our national parks and just removing jobs and leaving our environment incredibly vulnerable. So I think it's actually worth a conversation, especially with AI and with the trajectory. I think when we're talking about AI, it's so important to really pinpoint exactly what AI is. And I think as this conversation has been going, you're hearing it is so many different things. It's not just ChatGPT, right? And so when we're thinking about AI as a whole, we have to actually think about where it's coming from. I think that so many of us think about AI and we actually just full stop. This is our laptop. We have AI in front of us, and that's great. I know it takes an energy. I know there's an energy consumption battle right now somewhere. Water goes into this. What is actually happening? Yeah, right. It's nebulous at this point. Talking about that black box, nobody has any idea. So I actually wanted to just take some time to really go to a smaller level of energy consumption, especially because this is a huge topic currently. Now, if we're thinking about it, everyone has lights everywhere, right? We have to light up our houses. One light bulb has about 80 to 120 watts, right? That's pretty much baseline. Everybody knows that that's energy. So we know that actually does impact the environment, right? And then if you're thinking about on a higher scale level, you have watts. What these data centers, which is actually where AI is coming from, is being powered through. It uses about roughly, and this is in 2022, it uses about roughly 240 to 340 terawatt hours. And again, that was in 2022. So if you can imagine now, that number has increased. To give you a perspective of what that actually means, a terawatt is equivalent to 1 trillion watts or 1,000 gigawatts. So that's, just to put it so plainly, that's a shit ton of energy. That's a lot of energy that we're dealing with here. And that actually is about 1 to 2% of global electricity. And if you're going, that's a lot. I don't really know what that means still. What's a data center? How are we actually powering these things? What's powering my AI source? Great. Perfect. Stick with me here for a second. A data center is actually a warehouse. It's about as big as Walmart. It's full of compute servers. So the reason that these data centers exist is because in order for compute servers to actually do what they're supposed to do with all of these AI platforms, which AI isn't just, again, ChatGPT, it can actually be your applications too. It's the ads in the background. In order for all of that to work together, there needs to be proximity. And so when you have all of these compute servers in a warehouse, they're all working rapid pace and they're just taking in energy. They're taking in a ton of energy and they're actually creating this beautiful information highway. And I even like to say there's traffic on this highway. Things are going into this highway. It's a lot of energy. And the question then becomes, where are we actually finding all of this energy to power a data center, which, by the way, it requires as much energy as a nuclear power plant to function? Where data centers are primarily getting their energy is traditional electric grids, which means they're drawing powers from the municipal power supply. So that is our cities or towns. So they're relying on a mixed sources of like coal, natural gas, and renewable energy. Now, a lot of the information out there is going to tell you that they want to use solar and wind energy to help power these data centers. Something that I really like to talk about is energy and energy sources, especially if we're talking about just education and educating on what's actually an energy source. Solar and wind energy is an unreliable energy source. It has the ability to not function consistently. Now, I want you to think back to AI, what AI is doing. It is running constantly. Unlike your laptop, unlike your phone that you could power off, unlike the lights that you can shut off and actually do something that's going towards benefiting the earth and the overall environment, these things are constantly running in the background. There is no off switch. If you have a solar drought and it's a super cloudy day, when you're relying on that solar energy, that means things are going to shut off. And I want to go back to a point that it's running off of municipal power. What that means is that the power is going to go to the people first. So that is your lights, right? You want to make sure your people actually have the electricity, the energy to function in their day-to-day. Where it's not going to go first are these data centers. And what happens if these data centers aren't powered with an unreliable energy source is that people still suffer. So that's why they're looking towards the gas. That's why they're looking towards coal. That's why they're looking towards nuclear power plants. And then that looks like finding the land to actually build all this, not just the data centers, but the nuclear power plants, the coal factories, right? Everything in order to actually power all of this. And so then if you're thinking, okay, that's great, I finally understand this energy thing. It's a lot of energy that's going to take to power this. We need a lot of land. The reason that it's actually an environmental issue is because if you think of coal, gas, and nuclear power, it all relates to high carbon emissions, air pollution, water pollution. And it's actually going to affect, as we've been talking about, minority groups. It's going to affect people that don't have all the access to clean water, to even their own land, right? And then I also even like to bring it back to, with all of the energy, as much as people are telling you what they're doing with their AI platforms and the data they're accruing and what's actually happening in the AI world, people aren't reporting the real statistics for climate change and what the emissions are and the energy going into this. So all of those facts that I just shared with you, that's what's been reported. It can be astronomically higher and you have no idea. But that's the issue with it, with all of these traditional like white men who are rich, who don't really care too much about the environment, then creating these AI models and finding the power to actually put it all together. They're not factoring this in and they don't have to report it properly, especially under our current administration. And I think that's so key because it really then looks like who's affected, and not to also then be like, so doom and gloom with this and be like, okay, now I am going to say no more AI. I'm actually not going to use any of this. I'm going to go become a hermit in the woods, right? That's not a solution because we do use this to power our business. I think all the women here have done a fantastic job telling you what you can do, which is actually interact with AI. Something that I really love to talk about with course creators is actually utilizing AI sustainably. And what that looks like is actually just not using as much chat. And I know that sounds so silly, but it's even those small little measures of just saying, okay, let me pause for a second. Let me think through the input I want to actually input. I'm not just going to write gobbledygook in there. I'm going to think through this input. I'm actually going to make it strategic off the bat, so that human first. And then what I put into AI, I know I'm getting back, but I'm not using as much energy, right? It's the small contributions. I also want to end on a positive note about the positive impacts AI has actually been having in the world around us. It does have it projected decades in the future, higher carbon emissions, a negative impact on our environment. And we can actually utilize AI to chart methane emissions, the carbon emissions, right? We have the ability to utilize these technologies to do something greater. It's been utilized to map destructive dredging of sand. So dredging, that's ships, they go into the ocean and they actually dredge out the underneath of the ocean floor. And that destroys crucial ecosystems within the oceans or water, just any waterways that is needed. And as I hope everybody remembers from like their 7th grade science class, the ocean is a carbon sink. So it's incredibly important to have those fully functional ecosystems that take in carbon emissions. So AI can actually help map where this destruction is happening, and we can do something about it. It also helps map areas of destructions after catastrophic events like a hurricane, and it can map the most damaged areas, and then it can tell crew where to focus their efforts and save lives, save pets, family heirlooms, important items, housing, infrastructure, all of the things that we as a society pour money into already. And it can also detect patterns in data and use historic evidence to accurately predict future outcomes. So that's incredibly important when it comes to environmental catastrophes or impacts, that not to be like, again, doom and gloom or a realist about anything, but it's been ramping up. We've been seeing more hurricanes. We've been seeing wildfires, right? We've been seeing greater issues. So we can actually utilize AI for good. And there are a bunch of people out in the space already using it. So while we do take in a bunch of energy and it does have carbon emissions, there are clean, green ways to do so without just slapping the green label on it and engaging with people who are really doing something in this community.
Oh, I love that so much. Lauren, did you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say thank you. That was like the best way that it's been described, I feel like. So thank you for that. I'm sorry. You were like left to the end. I was like, we need to get her chatting. But that
No, it's okay. Honestly, I feel like it built up. I was like, okay, this is a heavy, depressing topic. Let's let them all share their wonderful ideas.
really depressing topic.
Oh my goodness. I think it's so important to think about, again, it goes back to the values and like being intentional with yourself first, and then also those around that you might have influence over, and then deciding, okay, what can I do to make an impact? And I do think that honestly, what keeps getting me with like the boycotting of AI tools because of environmental impact, that's a personal choice, but I can just attest that, man, using AI tools with intention, and really, I was nerdy and did the math, and I saved on average 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week, and 70 hours a month last year using AI tools in my business. And yes, I have started taking the weekends off more and enjoying my life, and have seen so much more success and done so much more in this past year. And also, I find that as I am taking more time, personal energy to like look into the issues that I care about and advocate for them, like AI is also really helping me do that. And I'm trying to also focus on the big impact things, like the immediate impact things, my own community, but also those big impact things that like really are making the difference. As I was looking into AI and the environment and all that stuff, it was kept comparing it to when they were really putting environmental impact on the individual. How can you reduce your carbon footprint?
Take a shower. Yeah.
Yeah. When all these giant companies that are making the biggest like carbon emissions are like just still doing it like no problem, because everyone's concerned about themselves and they're greenwashing their initiatives and stuff. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. That was my dog's leg that just picked up over here. To that point as well, it's I think we're all in a unique position to create the types of businesses that embrace AI as a tool to help people be more efficient and fulfilled in their job, and not use it as a way to expect higher productivity to destructive rates. And I think that's where you're going to see this divide, especially in gendered business ownership, traditional female, traditional male, is there is the feedback that I got when I started talking about AI through my socials was like, yeah, now my boss is going to expect me to do things to the 40th power. And so it's like, how do we start to continue or even continue to have the conversation of, if the thing that used to take me 12 hours now takes me 2 hours, what can I do with those 10? And it's not making more blogs. Like, it's what else can we do? And within reason, but I think we have a really unique opportunity and potential to write the script for the types of businesses that we want to have, and to encourage our team members and encourage our employees to critical think the best way to get the job done, to then go do more of the things that are going to fulfill them and make them better community members and friends and partners and parents and spouses and all these things. Like, and that again comes to the culture bit of it and the human part of it, of that always still has to be a part of the conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I
sorry. I was just going to say that we do have a really small opportunity. We also really have a kind of golden opportunity for people that do have their own businesses, which I gather is at least some of our audience in the chat, and it's all of us, right? It, like, having your own business, you actually get to make an active choice about what that uplift in productivity and efficiency means. So in my business, for example, my entire team work part-time hours and we pay full-time salary. So I have every Friday off with my partner. He also doesn't work on Fridays, and all our kids are either in daycare or school. It's the best day of the week, right? It's like, I took a walk along the beach. We had a coffee at 10 a.m. We come home and we have a nap in the middle of the day. I constantly have to fight the urge that I could be doing more and serving more and achieving more, because I actually do have an extra day a week of time. But what I remind myself is I'm already doing more than I ever could have done before, because I leverage all of these tools, and so are my entire team. So even though we're a small team and there's only 5 of us, if we think that we're at least getting 2 extra days, that's 10 extra days. So I actually have another 2 full-time staff in my team already. I don't need to fill that other day. So you can make a conscious decision about what that means for you and the type of life that we would like to lead. And I think globally we're seeing a cultural shift towards that kind of more work-life balance, but AI provides you another opportunity to assess what that actually looks like for you. And also, just a tiny point about the environmental thing. I did my PhD in conservation ecology. I always thought I was going to be the next David Attenborough and save the world. I didn't quite do that, but I'm doing my bit anyway. I constantly talk about this as well. For me as well, I really think that humanity is getting to the point where we have such huge challenges that we really probably didn't hope to solve them on our own. I know we're all talking about AI and energy use, but AI is much bigger than us writing an email, right? AI is the ability to process huge amounts of data very quickly and make informed decisions about what that data tells us. So at a global perspective, we may actually have hope of solving some of our biggest challenges, like water sanitation, like food security, like global climate change, because we have AI to help us get there and iterate and test and refine. Yes, I always encourage people, don't use it like Google. Google uses much less energy. If you're just going to search things, go and use Google. Use it for fit for purpose. If you're going to make weird cat videos, and unless like you're serving an underserved community that feels more included by having cat videos, don't just go and use it for random crap. But if you're leveraging it to be another person to launch and scale your dreams, stereotypically, and totally biased because I love women, but women have great ideas and dreams that actually make communities better places. And we know that the more wealth women have, the more they give back, the more that people around them benefit. So I think using it to launch and scale your dreams is a wonderful use of the energy, personal opinion. But on the flip side, we might actually be able to save the world with AI. So we're going to have to do a bit of a cost-benefit analysis, and we are going to have to use some more resources to get to that point.
Yeah. And I think everyone, not everyone, but most of you guys have talked about using AI to save yourself time and to get time back. But I've like almost been trying to move myself away from being the person that's talking about using AI for automation and looking at it also about using it for like creativity and using it less so to save yourself time, because like people be like, oh, how much time do you save? I'm like, none. I don't save any time because I'm spending all that other time like trying out these other tools and playing around. And now I'm going even deeper down into this idea that I was going to do. But now I've got the tools to actually help me get there. And now, or it's, maybe I'm not saving time, but now I'm taking on more clients because I technically save time, but now I've got more time to bring them in. Or maybe I can charge more because I'm doing more for them. Or it's not always about the time savings. It's about so much more than that too. And I think that's always something to remember on top of it, that it's not all about automation. It's not always about using this tool to be your customer service bot. Sometimes that's going to be a shittier option. It'd probably be better to just talk to the person as a person and then use the AI to do something else. So it's always going to be dependent on that person and what it is that they're trying to solve in their end goal. But always thinking about that. It's not just about saving time. It's about doing more with
and creating where things don't exist, being able to create world building, to be able to help greenlight a client's vision, to see something that they otherwise are. They're a small business. They can't afford a $15,000 full day video shoot, but can we create the assets that are going to help you connect to who you need? One of the first things that Lauren really helped me with was we did a campaign for a tennis tournament here in San Diego. And so I generated out as if tennis balls like flooded the whole city, and we posted them on the internet. And this was 2022, so people didn't really understand generative AI, and we pissed off a lot of boomers in the process. But it was an opportunity to do something to catch people's attention, but to show like an unlimited creativity in a new way, and like really flex our muscles of, okay, what could this be? And could we not in an evil way, but blur the line of reality? Because then I went and got tennis balls made with the logos on them and then threw them at the beach and took a video of them there being like, oh, I found one, as if the campaign continued. So there is this kind of like playfulness. And I think if you're not doing it with malintention, there are ways to really push the envelope creatively. Lauren's been such a wealth of knowledge for that. And with fashion, with art.
Well, even Michelle, I think the tennis example, I want to come back to your tennis example, because I remember when you posted that and somebody commented on it saying, oh my God, the tennis pollution, like the fact that you would throw all this into there. And it's, look at, now we have options, but that's the thing is now, what if we wanted to do this, but now we don't have to go and pollute the city. Now we can actually just create the idea. And here it is, right? And we are now able to take these ideas that maybe would never have been possible or would be terrible for the environment if you did it, or X, Y, Z, and you bring it to life in a whole new way that like you maybe wouldn't have been able to.
So we generated out like ice cream cones as if they were shaped like tennis balls. And then it became a whole thing of what flavor would it be? And then we contacted 4 different artisan ice cream shops in the area saying, could you do a version of like key lime pie ice cream flavor that could scoop and look like tennis balls? Like it just was a fun way to, again, like stretch our muscles, find different ways to, the message was come to the tennis tournament. And we got there through the means that were untraditional marketing. And I think that space is really fun. It's fun for me. I know Lauren and I are always sending each other voice notes about it.
Yeah, we love it. But not everyone has the ability for things to be fake all the time.
Of course. We live in a very creative, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. And everyone else is, okay, but we have real facts.
Yeah.
But I love the point that you guys are bringing up too, because that's something that I keep trying to explain to like anytime I'm on a podcast or anything. Like one of my like biggest fears when I first started hearing about AI tools is like, what is this going to do to our creativity and critical thinking skills? Isn't the internet fake enough as it is? And yes, and there's 2 sides of the coin. And when I first started using the tools, like I quickly became aware, holy crapkins, every freaking idea that you ever have, you can quickly process it and make it happen and all these things. And I like to bring up too, this is something I realized after the fact, but like I used to manage like 7 content clients by myself as a solopreneur in like 2020. And could I do it? Yes. Did I have the strategies to do it? Yes. But was I feeling just so creatively drained all the time? Yeah. And like task switching, brand switching. But like with AI, it took me to realize after looking back, wait a second, in 2024, I never felt that like creative drain where it wasn't even like traditional burnout. It was more just, I like am feeling excited about these brands I love creating and I'm just exhausted. And like with AI, it helped me carry that creative load to be able to do more and imagine more. And from idea to idea, like I love to do all the time, and work through like my idea that's like nagging at my head while I'm working away. I'm like, like I can't focus because I have this idea nagging in my head. Okay, I'm going to hop into ChatGPT and just tell yell at that. Okay, now I can come back and focus on my task. So there's lots of like just daily things and ways that it can help you creatively. But man, guys, I have loved this conversation. It could go on for another hour, let's be honest, but like it can't because we have lives. I just wanted to wrap up the conversation by asking everyone to share just what is one kind of action step that like either you're taking to navigate AI moving forward or that you would encourage others to take. Maya, do you want to share first?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. So some of the things that I've been messing around with AI, especially with just environmental impacts, is as everybody said, I'm actually feeding facts, like legit facts that I have fact checked online about the environment into AI and actually having it integrate in my sustainable business model as well. So it's not just that I'm utilizing those facts for my day-to-day and educating. I'm actually educating my AI, but I'm integrating it as well into my system. So everything that I mention within my own business has sustainability at the forefront. I know that's such an overused word. We can all use a different word than just sustainability, but really like sustainable practices as well. And just figuring out how to have it be like a real life implication, as well as taking the inputs that I'm utilizing and then sharing them with the world in a, again, sustainable business model for other people to utilize as well, for course creators that have that crazy impact. So just also knowing who to bring your information to. Another thing that I love to do is I do love to volunteer. So I actually think it's incredibly important to go volunteer in your just like local spheres, but bring AI to the table as well. Something that I've done locally is actually bring AI integration into my local Fish and Wildlife Service, because they also need that and don't know how to use it. So if you know how to use it and feel like doing some good, that's also another way, because some of these business models are underfunded and don't know how to actually utilize AI. That's one huge thing that I've done.
I love that so much. Michelle, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity, like I said at the beginning of this whole thing, is to being the early adopter in tech makes sure that you at least are starting to have a voice at the table. If you decide to opt out completely, then you really won't have a say in how this thing goes. And I think a lot of the ethics conversations, the sustainability conversations, the usability conversations need more people with empathy in them. And that it's much easier to have your voice heard when you are an active participant. And to your point, to the local level, I'm super concerned. I live in Southern California about housing and homelessness. And so I'm putting myself in the rooms with the Housing Commission and I'm asking them questions because I have very strong feelings about these things. And I think it's really easy to get distracted by social media and to get distracted about where you think your impact is. It's also very easy to feel small in these conversations. And so I'd implore anyone listening to find an outlet where you can, number one, listen, and number two, start to ask questions. And especially if it's something that you feel strongly about, I think that in AI and in all things. And then on the flip side of that, as a business, like we're using this to help greenlight more women entrepreneurs and get their dreams realized faster, and helping them start their brick and mortar locations and their small businesses and get their brands off the ground in a more cost-effective way for them to then be able to impact change in their circles. So that is our silver lining of the AI conversation.
I love that. Okay, Lauren.
I think just making sure that you're being diligent and vigilant around images and videos that you are seeing and taking in that have some sort of real life implications, right? Like making sure that the stuff that you are ingesting is the wrong word. You're not ingesting it, but that you're taking it is real, and doing your due diligence to fact check things that you feel like maybe are not. And then also just thinking about the tools that you're using and making sure that you're keeping an open mind and checking out what's popping up. So I know we talked about privilege a lot, but now we do have a lot more tools that are open source, that are free to use. Looking into just what options do you have and figuring out how to stay, in the know around what's going on with some of these tools, because for anything, for all we know, like you could be using one tool and tomorrow regulations could change and the entire tool is shut down. So having backup options for some of the things that you are very dependent on, I think is really smart, especially now, especially if you're in the US. Who knows? I still think we're going to lose TikTok. I don't know what anyone else's opinion on that is, but I think it's going. I think we're going to lose it. So I don't know what's going to happen with a lot of these tools. I think it's smart to just keep your eyes open and your tools open.
Diverse.
Yeah, diverse is the right word.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, Kelsey, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing for me is this human first part of the conversation that we've had, and we focused on it a lot today, so I won't reiterate it too much. But even in my business, I'm a data analyst, right? So I go in and I dig up golden nuggets of information from people's stuff. And every single time it comes back to how can we personalize more? The AI conversation is the same thing. It's how can I use this from a human first perspective, from a customization perspective, from a I care about you as a human, and this is a tool that's helping me show you that care even more. And I think we can all do that in various different ways. But for me, it's that amplification of my own desire to be human first and person first. In therapy, we call it person centered, right? Letting the person that I wish to impact be centered in all things and be the purpose behind why I'm utilizing my tools, why I'm doing what I do, and why I'm doing it in the way that I'm doing it.
Yes. And you know, I agree with that, girl. Okay, Nikki, what would you say for us?
I think everyone has had such amazing points and I don't want to take up too much time. So I guess my call to action is take up space. Women need to take up space. We deserve to take up space. We can take up space in AI. We can take up space culturally. We can take up space in our society, in our communities. Just take up space. Don't be afraid to make people make room for you and your ideas and values and the way that you see the world. Women are very good at being quiet for a very long time because we've been taught to do that really well. This is your invitation to do the exact opposite, because we actually do have a really tiny window in history to change how the world operates. And when I say that, I get goosebumps. It is such a special moment in history, and I don't want anyone to underemphasize how big of a role that you can play just as an individual. And that doesn't come about very often in time.
Yes.
And I think for the Americans here, we have to even fight even harder for them.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And don't worry, the world over, we are watching and it's supported. If you'd like to come and stay in my spare bedroom in Australia, there's always space.
I would love to. I
need refuge.
Oh my gosh, you guys, this is so great. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I had to hop off, but her action step was identify one way AI allows you to revive a goal you had that you feel you never had time for, which I love because it's bringing it back to you. Yeah. And what I would just say too, guys, I've just been really trying to have conversations, be intentional about spreading the word, and have those conversations with the people in your life who you're like, I don't think my mom or grandma cares about AI, but I'll tell her about it. And who knows, she'll go tell her little biddies. Like during the US election, my grandma was like buying woke books for her friends that she plays cards with and stuff. So it spreads. So I've just had to say that. And I will say that, guys, make sure that you're following us all on Instagram. In the resource guide, I've linked our Instagrams and our websites, and I'll link our websites and Instagrams in the replay of this too. So make sure you connect with all of us. But thank you guys so much for being a part of this panel. I've loved this conversation so much. Wow. Thank you so much for listening to our AI political expert round table. My friend, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. There were so many amazing knowledge nuggets that these women experts had to share. And I really hope that you not only listened and can implement some of the tips, start mulling over some of the things that we talked about, but also I would love it if you could share this conversation with other amazing women business owners who should also listen to it. Again, you will find that resource guide in the links, as well as all the links to the awesome panelists that we had. And let's go ahead and connect on Instagram. I am at Authentic AI for Entrepreneurs. Send me a message. Let me know that you listened to this live stream. Let me know what your favorite takeaways or insights were. And let's just keep this conversation going. All right. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll catch you next time I catch you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Authentic AI for Entrepreneurs, my friend. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your shows.